Welcome to the Sunday Painter, the channel about everything painting. I've hand-picked videos from YouTube, from how to paint to making money from your art, with advice from seasoned artists. Check out my channel, click on the video link under the top banner, to see all my educational videos, may save years of struggle. Today we are going to talk about the Group of Seven. You say you never heard of them? If you are Canadian, you know these artists. The Group 7 set out to capture nature, the glory and diversity of Canada, while creating a Canadian art tradition and established an environment of tolerance to new ideas. They found a lot to paint. Even Canadians sometimes find it hard to understand the geographic scope of their country. Second in size only to Russia. The paintings of the Group of Seven represent a landscape that is distinctly Canadian. Stay around to the end and hear my thoughts. You can use them to improve your work by studying the Group of Seven. Come and improve your art and expand your knowledge. Become a part of the Best Art channel and leave a happy comment, or let me know if there is an artist you would like to learn about. See you on the other side.
The Sunday Painter.
When starting out this video on the Group of Seven, I had a bit of a conflict. The art of the group is vast. Do I talk about the group in general or each individual? I found it would do either justice. I'm going to take a cue from a very articulate subscriber and focus on three of the seven. MacDonald, Lawren Harris, and my favorite Thomson. The Group of Seven, also sometimes known as the Algonquin School, was a group of Canadian landscape painters from 1920 to 1933. They believed that a distinct Canadian art could be developed through direct contact with nature. The Group of Seven is best known for its paintings inspired by the Canadian landscape, and initiated the first major Canadian national art movement. Traveling throughout Ontario, especially the Muskoka and Algoma regions, sketching the landscape and developing techniques to represent it in art. They decided to make themselves into a group devoted to a distinct Canadian form of art which did not exist yet, and began to call themselves the Group of Seven. The group received criticism for its reinforcement of terra nullius, which means nobody's land, presenting the region as pristine and untouched by humans when in fact the areas depicted have been lived in for many centuries. Not to say they only painted trees and sky, like many artists they also painted what was around them in their time. The group were regarded as the creators of a national style of painting that did not use the academic formulas of painting found in Europe. They chose to revive Canadian art and create a new tradition that did not rely on European trends. The efforts of the Seven changed the perception of Canadian art as sensibility to that which should be unique to Canada. They gave many Canadians a sense of national identity and enabled them to discover the beauty of their own country. The group's influence was so widespread by the end of 1931, and after MacDonald's death in 1932, they no longer found it necessary to continue as a group of painters. They announced that the group had been disbanded and that a new association of painters would be formed, known as the Canadian Group of Painters, and was a successful society until 1967. We are going to start with the artist who initiated the first major Canadian national art movement called the Group of Seven. James Edward Hervey MacDonald RCA, 1873 to 1932, was an English Canadian. Born in Durham, England, to an English mother, Margaret Usher, and a Canadian father, William MacDonald, who was a cabinet maker. In 1887, at the age of 14, he immigrated with his family to Hamilton, Ontario. That year he began his first training as an artist at the Hamilton Art School. Also a writer, poet, he started out as a graphic designer in Toronto while still going to school. He went to London for 4 years and in 1903 returned back to Toronto. It was at Grip Limited, a commercial art firm, where he met Thomson. It was Thomson's art who inspired MacDonald and the other future painters of the Group of Seven. In 1908, when MacDonald took up a passion for art and painting, Lawren Harris saw one of his paintings at a gallery and persuaded him to take up painting full-time. He focused mostly on winter Toronto scenes and logging landscapes in northern Ontario. He set out and was determined to replicate the feeling of the rugged Canadian landscape. To capture this he used rough brush strokes and stylized forms. He believes that through nature, man reaches a higher spiritual end. He found inspiration in the countryside and began to take trips up to Georgian Bay and Algonquin Park. After developing his own unique style to the genre, he organized a show of his work at the Arts and Letters Club of Toronto in November 1911. In 1913, MacDonald and Harris traveled to the Albright Art Gallery in Buffalo, New York, where they attended an exhibit of Scandinavian Impressionist landscape paintings. The two artists felt that the uninhibited approach of Scandinavian wilderness could be adopted by Canadian painters to create a unique Canadian form. Every summer beginning in 1924, MacDonald traveled to the Canadian Rockies to paint the mountainous landscapes that dominated his later work. By this time he had become somewhat alienated from the rest of the group of seven, as many of the younger members were beginning to paint in a more abstract manner. MacDonald is viewed with general admiration for his art, with one writer commenting, "No Canadian landscape painter possessed a richer command of color and pigment than MacDonald. His brushwork is at once disciplined and vigorous. His best on-the-spot sketches possess an intensity and freshness of execution not dissimilar from Van Gogh." His former home and 4-acre garden in Vaughan, Ontario have been restored. Owned by the city of Vaughan, they are open to the public. MacDonald suffered a stroke in 1931, and spent the following summer recovering in Barbados. He died in Toronto on November 26, 1932 at the age of 59. He was buried at Prospect Cemetery in Toronto. Here is a quote from MacDonald. "It is the work of the Canadian artist to paint or play or write in such a way that life will be enlarged for himself and his fellow man. The painter will look around him, and finding everything good, will strive to communicate that feeling through a portrayal of the essentials of sunlight, or snow, or tree or tragic cloud, or human face, according to his power and individuality." The second artist we are going to look at of the group of seven. Lawren Harris. A Canadian artist who was born in Brantford, Ontario in 1885 to 1970, becoming an artist just like his father. Coming from a wealthy family, he was able to devote himself entirely to his art. He plays a very important role in art history as he was one of the best-known landscape painters as well as the leader of the group. Harris wrote poetry too. He was also the founding member and the first president of the Canadian Group of Painters 1932. He spent his time capturing landscapes focused mainly on the north of Canada. He brought the group together by a common interest of artworks which symbolizes Canada's identity. He organized the first of what were to become the famed boxcar trips to Algoma. He gave new vision to representations of the northern Canadian landscape. Harris spent 3 years studying in Germany, 1904-07, where he became interested in theosophy, a mystical branch of religious philosophy that influenced his later paintings. His beliefs and ideas throughout his life, so much so that one might say that he reimagined theosophy through Canadian art. Using calm, soothing, cool colors, such as light blues, white, gray, and a little amount of brown in this vibrant painting. He was influenced by the Russian Kandinskys concerning the spiritual in art, and he subsequently incorporated symbolic color into surfaces of his work. His earlier paintings was of houses and streets in Toronto and the Maritimes, and that extraordinary piece of Canadian Gothic, the portrait of Salem Bland, contemplative quality of the painting, by the intensity with which the painter's whole mind is concentrated on his subjects. In 1918 he was advised by his doctor to move to the Algoma region to find peace and mental rest. Soon, Harris fell in love with nature and wrote, "There was a wild richness and clarity of colors in the woods. I became conscious that the spirit of the land has to be discovered through its character." The sense of artistic mission was reborn. He increased his tendency to reduce forms to their essence. Mountains, water, islands, forests, and trees became more and more idealized, and the human presence disappeared entirely from his paintings and painting of oneness. He was convinced that art is a realm of life between our mundane world and the world of the spirit, between the infinite diversity of manifested life and the unity or harmony of the spirit, or between the temporal world and the realm of enduring and incorruptible ideation. Later in his work he began painting abstract pictures, composed of large geometric forms, which initially derived from his Rocky Mountain and Arctic canvases. Those abstractions were among the first in Canadian art. Harris settled in Vancouver in 1940 and continued to paint until his death in 1970. Here is a quote by Harris. "Visible nature is but a distorted reflection of a more perfect world, and the creative individual viewing her is inspired to perceive within and behind her many garments, that which is timeless and entirely beautiful. The last of the artists I want to talk about, and also my favorite painter of the group, is Thomson. My favorite work of his is called the Jack Pine, which I will put at the end of the video. I think it's how it's painted that draws me to it. There is a great restoration video on the Jack Pine. I'll put a link in the description so you can take a closer look at this wonderful painting. Born August 5, 1877, in Claremont, Ontario, Thomas John Thomson grew up on a farm in Leith, a small town near Owen Sound. He was the sixth of 10 children of his mother Margaret. She loved literature, and his father John was something of a naturalist. Almost all the family sketched. Due to a slight illness, he was encouraged to wander freely through the countryside, and enjoyed long, uninterrupted hours of fishing and hunting, always carrying his sketch pad and pencils. In 1906, Thomson received his first fine art training. He took lessons from the academician William Cruikshank, either through night school at the Central Ontario School of Art and Design, or privately, at Cruikshank's studio. He got a job at Grip Limited, a well-known and thriving commercial art firm in Toronto, where he started to work about 1909. This is where he meets MacDonald and the group. Placed under the tutelage of MacDonald, Thomson's natural ability began to flower. The two men were kindred spirits, both loved nature and literature. The group's interest in Thomson's sketches is that their subject matter provided a way to break with academic art. They were attracted by the idea of developing an art that expressed qualities in Canadian nature, rougher, bolder, wilder and more northern than the country recorded by earlier painters. Producing 400 or more small oil paintings. They are found on wooden panels, canvas board, plywood, and cigar box lids in the plein air style. Quickly executed sketches, he also saw connections between music and painting. He once told a friend that imperfect notes destroy the soul of music. One can see in his design a correlation to musical intervals, contributing a sort of rhythm, touch and tone to his paintings. Most engaging for the viewer are his bold use of color and his sense of spectacle channeled through an experience of northern nature. The paintings, with their rich colors, often have a sense of movement, of dynamism and drive. Executed in a palette of red, pink, brown, light and dark blue, with a finesse suited to a naturalist. His sketches in particular show how he matured into a subtlety of expression, using a brisk but delicate handling. The bold and expressive brushstrokes that he is now famous for are evident. The death of Thomson occurred on July 8, 1917, on Canoe Lake in Algonquin Provincial Park, Ontario. After Thomson drowned in the water, his upturned canoe was discovered later that afternoon and his body 8 days later. He was considered a great outdoorsman and extremely proficient. Many theories regarding Thomson's death, including that he was murdered or committed suicide, have become popular in the years since his death, though these ideas lack any substantiation. Although he died before the formal establishment of the Group of Seven, Thomson is often considered an unofficial member. His art is typically exhibited with the rest of the groups, nearly all of which remains in Canada. There you have it, a simple introduction into the Group of Seven and some of its artists. Here are some of my thoughts on the Seven. I think it's very important to share your art, good or bad, with like-minded people. This channel was created to learn and share these ideas. To become a part of a community like the Group of Seven. One helping the other to push the boundaries of status quo. Going beyond subject or color. In my videos I seek the bigger picture, not just a pretty work but the reason why we create. There may or may not be another Group of Seven, but you can belong to the Group of Sunday Painters. As always, there is a lot more to the Group of Seven and these artists. Hope this sparks your interest to find out more. Keep painting, my friends.